What's up, guys? Welcome to It's Not Canon. I am Wesley.
I'm Blake.
And I guess today we're talking about episode 2 of Picard.
Maps and Legends.
Amen. Before we jump in, can we talk about how, we trolled the fandom a little bit and caught some heat and stirred up a little shit on the interwebs?
Sure. I mean, we knew that the title of the show was going to be inflammatory. That's kind of the point.
I think it's because you put It's Not Canon on the screen, right? Like the whatever you call it, the slide.
Right.
And people thought we were saying Picard isn't canon.
Well, that's fine. I clearly, in the social text said that that's not what we were saying, but why would we expect people to read the social text?
Should we make this very clear what we're saying about this? Look, it's okay to criticize Star Trek, but if you're just coming on these message boards, on these Facebook groups just to say that Star Trek now sucks and that Alex Kurtzman is ruining everything and this isn't Star Trek, then we just don't want to hear your shit.
I feel like an honest person approaches something that they're watching and spending their own time on with the idea that I want to enjoy this. And if you don't want to enjoy it,
to just go away.
Just fuck off.
Now there are parts of, I could pick apart most of Voyager, which I wasn't a fan of, or Enterprise, or I could pick apart a lot of TNG, and there are even some things within the last 2 episodes of Picard that I didn't necessarily love, but as a whole, I love Star Trek, and I especially love what's happening now with the expansion of the universe.
That seems like a good place to start.
Man, I loved the violence. And so let's just jump in right here, because I've got 3 kids, right? 3 boys under the age of 5, and I want them to be able to enjoy Star Trek the way I did. But I can't let them watch Picard or Discovery. I know there's a lot of controversy over the F-bombs. I was more concerned with the violence than I am the F-bombs. But what I love about the expansion, before we talk more specifics about the violence or the F-bombs, what I love about the expansion is they're adding 2 cartoons to it. So while they're making Picard more adult and Discovery more adult, they're giving something to the kids also, which I think is just awesome. So I can have my thing that they can't watch, but then I'm going to have 2 cartoons that I'm going to be able to watch with my boys. And I love that.
Do you remember the episode, I think it was the season finale of TNG season 1. It was the one where the bugs had infiltrated the Federation?
Yeah.
At the end of that episode, that dude Remek's head straight up explodes and like his chest cavity is like lying open on the chair.
Yeah.
Now it looks terrible these days. It didn't age well at all because it was, TV budget in 1987. It is what it is. But if they were doing that now, you better believe that would be some gruesome shit.
Well, I don't think this is getting away from what Gene Roddenberry wanted to do. I actually think he pushed the limits. With Kirk and Uhura kissing for the first time, that was pushing the limits. Yeah. He just couldn't put that kind of violence or that kind of cursing into TV at that time. So we're just having a progression to what modern culture will allow. If they would have allowed it, then I think it would have happened then.
Star Trek has always been a product of its time.
100%.
You can't make The Next Generation in 2020. You can't make Deep Space Nine in 2020, although it's a little closer.
100%. Sorry, we're actually filming this during the day at work and drinking beer on the clock, and we had some staffers out there wondering what the hell we're doing. So that's what I'm waving at.
We're working.
I loved the beginning of the episode. I loved F8, Fate, coming in. I loved how he killed himself. I loved Data's eyes in him. Mm-hmm. The one thing I did think was cool, the Easter egg they dropped was the replicator.
Yeah.
The Una setting.
Right.
From going back
to
from the short trek, which made it a point to talk about that in that short trek.
Yeah, that was
cool.
That
was really good.
Yeah. There was a couple of little things in the teaser where they were dealing with these Mars workers and the androids that were like directly speaking to some of the stuff, again, connecting back to a couple of TNG episodes and specifically how the Federation was dealing with artificial life. Mm-hmm. You've got, this guy looks like Data, right? Superficially, he looks like Data in a lot of ways. Obviously, it's not Brent Spiner, but it's very similar, except he doesn't have hair. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have eyebrows. They didn't take the time building this android to say, we're going to put hair on this thing.
Yeah.
They didn't really take the time to make him human-like in his software.
That's right.
It clearly hadn't progressed past anything that we would have seen in early seasons of Data.
Yeah.
He was very robotic. And these people also, in contrast to the people in the Enterprise, clearly had no interest in humanizing these guys either. They were interacting on a very superficial level. They were making fun of him behind his back. It's just...
But it goes to the whole point of what Measure the Man was saying, in particular the conversation that Picard had with Guinan, wasn't it? Yeah, with Guinan about slavery.
And this should work out fine. Maddox could get lucky and create a whole army of Datas, all very valuable.
Oh, yes, no doubt.
He's proved his value to you.
In ways that I cannot even begin to calculate.
And now he's about to be ruled the property of Starfleet. That should increase his value. Well, consider that in the history of many worlds, there have always been disposable creatures. They do the dirty work. They do the work that no one else wants to do because it's too difficult or too hazardous. And an army of Datas, all disposable. You don't have to think about their welfare. You don't think about how they feel. Whole generations of disposable people.
Dude creeps me out.
Hey, he can hear you.
And you can't offend them. They're not people.
Is that where you were going with this? Like, that's what they were doing. They weren't creating people like Data. They were creating slaves.
Right. And Bruce Maddox and Picard had a very related conversation in that same episode.
If I am permitted to make this experiment, the horizons for human achievements become boundless. Consider, every ship in Starfleet with the data on board, utilizing its extraordinary capabilities, acting as our hands and eyes in dangerous situations.
Look, you're preaching to the choir here. Why don't you get to the point?
Data must not be permitted to resign.
Data is a Starfleet officer. He still has certain rights.
Right. I'm sick to death of hearing about rights.
Every starship in Starfleet with a data on board. Imagine them doing all these things we don't want to do.
That's what they're doing. That's
disposable people, as Guinan put it, and that's clearly what's going on here. Now, did you notice that at the very end of that sequence, right before he killed himself, the intercom said "Cascade failure in progress"?
I did not.
That's how they described Lal's eventual demise, as a cascade failure when she was growing.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
She's growing emotionally aware and eventually destroys herself or gets shut down by Data, but it's a cascade failure. So we'll have to dig more into that once they give us more information, but it hints at maybe these guys were like, we've had enough of this crap.
Yeah, I actually thought whenever F8 was hacked, it looked a lot like, and I forgot her name, the character from Discovery.
Arian.
Arian, oh, I love that character. But I thought that connection there, I mean, it was almost exactly the same how that went down.
Yeah, it was, okay. Do we think that Control has a part of this?
I don't think so, because I think you're adding too much into it at that point. I mean, if you've already got Romulans and the Borg, I mean, if you come in and you bring Control into it, I think you're just adding way too much in there. And I think Picard really wants to draw in new fans, people like my wife who never really watched Star Trek and who are watching Picard with me. But if you start bringing that much into it, I think you start losing a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, it was already, and God, man, I've got a bad cold, so my brain's just not working. But the Romulan secret police, the Zhat Vash, right? Like things that most people wouldn't know. And you're going so deep into the history of the Borg that if you bring in something like Control, it's just a little too many parts to a story, especially for a new fan.
Can we talk about the Zhat Vash for a second?
Yeah.
I know we're kind of skipping ahead.
Hell yeah, we should name this episode Hell Yeah, because I loved that with F8 at the beginning.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. I'm a little puzzled, and maybe I'm sure they'll dig more into this later, but I'm puzzled at the choice of saying there's another cabal, as Laris put it, within the Tal Shiar called the Zhat Vash. And I'm like, well, do they really need to do that? Like, why do they need it? The Tal Shiar are already creepy and secretive.
Yeah.
Like, why add that level of complication to it? Like, why couldn't they just say that's the Tal Shiar, you know?
Yeah.
I would have bought that.
Maybe because of the downfall of Romulus, it was like the Tal Shiar was already so part of the culture that it like killed everything, so it required like something even further underneath to survive. If that makes any sense?
Yeah.
It's like whenever you level a house, sometimes you'll still have like the bugs down there, right? That makes sense?
I'm sure that it'll make sense as we go into it, and it, you know, what with Laris and what's his face being Tal Shiar agents themselves.
Yeah.
You know.
And by the way, did you finally read the comics?
Yes, I finally did.
So I mean, it did a really good job of explaining in comic number 3.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed those.
I have to say, I'm not a comic reader, generally speaking.
Yeah.
I read novels and I watch TV, and like comics are cool, but there's just something about it I can't really like. I have a problem in my brain just latching onto the story. Like I'm too distracted by I don't know. It just doesn't work for me. But I did read those, and they were very interesting. Also interesting, they brought Picard's old first officer from the ship when he was on that mission to.
Our brains just aren't
Our
working
brains,
today. What's the
yeah.
name of the damn ship? I don't remember. Who cares?
We'll skip that part.
So one of the most controversial parts everybody's been talking about was when Picard went to Starfleet to see if he can, get back in and get a ship. And the way he was just treated like complete shit. When I first saw it, I had such a visceral hatred toward that woman.
Yeah.
And then when I went back and watched it a second or third time, I just thought it added so much to Picard's character and just where he was and where he went. I mean, this wasn't just some random captain. This was a man who saved Earth numerous times. Yeah. And they're basically telling him to go straight to hell.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he basically the day before this whole thing went down in the Admiral's office had taken a giant dump all over Starfleet. They're not going to be happy with him after that. But I mean, I think it hints at something deeper than that, even that we don't really know the details of yet when he quit Starfleet. Yeah. Like there's some kind of like underlying resentment. Like even the ensign who was taking his name at the front door was like, he didn't really know who he was. Or he was pretending not to know who he was.
Well, it just goes back to show that this is such a different Starfleet now. And again, I love the modern cultural references because there is a lot of politics here that you didn't see in previous Star Trek. And I always did wonder, because I'm in politics full time, and we both do politics full time. So when you're watching these old episodes, you have to wonder, how is everybody on the same page all of a sudden? Humanity can't be this perfect, where everybody's just getting along. Like if you have an entity like Starfleet like the United Federation of Planets with all these different planets, then occasionally those planets are going to have to disagree. That's just real life. To say that they all agree all the time on this grand mission is just still, I know that you're trying to create this utopia, but I don't see how that can actually exist in reality. And they're showing now that like we abandoned Romulus because some of these planets were about to pull out. So it's showing the politics of it very much like the United Nations, like we see today, about whether they should go in and invade this country and what countries are going to go in there. And occasionally the United States has to go in there alone. You have to build these allies within the United Nations. I thought it was a very a great comparison to really what we have today.
That actually goes to one of the points that I've seen people complaining about, even though they've only seen 2 episodes now, is that the Federation would never abandon an entire species and leave them to die. Well, okay.
That's just bullshit.
I mean, first of all, it's not your show. You're not writing it, and you don't get to decide what is and is not Star Trek. But beyond that, let's talk about Season 2, Next Generation, the episode Pen Pals. Do you remember that one?
I don't.
It's the one where they're like exploring this star system that's having multiple planets just breaking up due to geological instability. And Data makes contact with a young alien girl named Sarjenka, little like red-faced alien girl.
You got a better memory than me, man. We've had hundreds of episodes. How do you remember the details of every episode?
I actually looked this one up and rewatched it because people are talking about the Prime Directive and how the Federation would never do that. Well, let's talk about the Prime Directive for a second. And that it's not so important on what it is in this episode versus this episode, and this is Star Trek and this is not. Is the Prime Directive is a vehicle for storytelling, right? Mm-hmm. You use that story element to say something about your characters and about the world. So Data finds this girl, he makes like radio contact with her while doing research, and they become pen pals. In which point, like, Picard finds out, and he's like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, her family's about to die, this planet's about to explode, we have to help them. And Picard's like, can't violate the Prime Directive, man. That's just the natural course of the universe.
Yeah, so they let the whole planet die.
In this situation, under these set of arbitrary circumstances, right. Just because the Federation decided that this is the line where we're not going to help people anymore, mm-hmm. Picard was willing to let an entire planet and civilization species just die.
Yeah.
Picard himself was he was fine with that. Data had to talk Picard into basically saving the species and violating the Prime Directive. Now, fast forward to the Romulan supernova. Mm-hmm. The Federation was apparently harangued into helping the Romulans because A, they requested it, which is, part of their standards in the Prime Directive of will we help these people or not. Yeah. And once it became economically unfeasible for them to continue helping, according to their member worlds, like you said, they decided not to help anymore.
That's right.
Now, does that mean this is not Star Trek? No, that's not what that means. What that means is the factors within the Federation and within Picard's character have changed between 1987 and now.
Well, you also see the trailers for season 3 of Discovery, and there's that image of the Federation flag. And I think there's only like 7 stars left in it.
Forgot about that.
So obviously some planets have dipped out of the United Federation.
Yeah.
Right? So there's obviously a lot of political stuff going on there.
Yeah, I feel like it goes back to this unfair criticism where fans are just sniping, because it's dishonest to ignore, the last 6 seasons of TNG, the entire run of DS9, and say that the Federation is this thing that Gene Roddenberry envisioned. Yes, but it's changed over time. That's a lot of time has passed between TOS and Picard, and they've been through the Borg invasion, they've been through the Dominion War.
Can I point? Okay, so like I said, we all have criticisms. We're not bashing criticisms. One of my biggest criticisms is there's no impact or anything from the Dominion War ever. Right. It was the biggest of all the wars, right? Because you and I are huge. I think we both agree that DS9 up until Discovery is probably my new favorite at the moment. Because I think Discovery season 2 is my favorite of all Star Trek, but until then, DS9 was always my favorite.
I have a hard time picking favorites, but I really, really do love Deep Space Nine, and I feel like, because I remember when that came out, fans were like, it's not Star Trek.
But the fact that we never see anything about the Dominion War, any fallout, any callback to it at all, I've always thought is kind of strange.
I feel like Deep Space Nine got kind of siloed.
It did.
I wouldn't say that it existed in its own canon, but there may have been some behind the scenes politics there that played into them never really bringing that in. The most we ever got on TNG of the Deep Space Nine stuff was Worf showing up on the Defiant in First Contact, which that's pretty minor. But you're right. You never really felt the effects. Yeah. The only other one was in Insurrection. The bad guy Ruafo. No. Was in the past 10 years you've been challenged by the Borg, the Dominion, et cetera, et cetera. It's they all smell the stink of death on the Federation.
That's right. So I'd like to see Picard at least address it in some way. But
I think they're going to. They're setting it up.
Yeah. Well, we don't got all day, but before we go, we got to talk about at least the Borg side of this.
Yeah.
Because what the hell?
Right.
So I guess when they're what would you even call it? Taking them apart, when they're disassembling them, when they
call it reclamation.
Reclaiming at least the technology. Mm-hmm. Are the species that were assimilated, the individuals, are they still alive? Or are they all dead? I can't read it from here.
I can't tell either. That guy could have been in stasis.
Because Soji's actually a psychologist.
Right.
Right? So you wouldn't have a psychologist there to just take apart the Borg unless they're still alive, and unless she's there to rehabilitate them. So
in some of the trailers, I think the trailer for next week, they showed a woman with clear marks of former Borg technology on her face. So at least some of them might still be alive, and they were talking about
obviously Hugh's coming on next episode too. So I'm wondering if he's there to bring these folks back in. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Something's going on there that we haven't figured out with the actual.
There's a lot that we don't know, because there's a little sign. I'm sure you've seen the sign where it's this facility is gone, blah, blah, blah days. It was 5,000 plus. That's 16 years they've had possession of this.
Yeah.
16 plus years. So this has been going on a while. Who knows what in-universe effects there are. Yeah. It's exciting.
So what else you got for this episode?
I don't know. Do we want to delve into more of what fans are bitching about, or save that for later?
A couple things. Today I was on there and fans were bitching that Data didn't look like Data, and people were commenting that androids shouldn't age. Guys, what are you supposed to do? Unless they would have made Brent Spiner like they did with Leia in Rogue One, where they would have did it all computer generated.
It's sniping, but also
how else do you do that? Brent Spiner aged 20 years, guys. Get over it.
I don't remember the episode, but Brent Data was on screen. He said on screen, noted that he will age He was designed to age.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, I don't remember the episode because I didn't look it up and I just thought of it just now, but it's there.
Part of her aging program, not only does she age in appearance like Data, her vital signs change too.
I'll put it on screen right here.
You know, people bitching about the pacing still, about lens flares. I mean, guys, here's my ultimate thing, right? Like, we are creatives. You are a videographer.
Yes.
By the way, great editing for the last episode.
Thank you.
You know, I'm a content writer. We are creatives. And what I hate are people that aren't creating anything, ripping apart the creativity of these people. It drives me absolutely apeshit. It's, you know, what are you doing possibly to be able to rip apart some people that are this creative and dedicated to expanding our universe?
Right. Now, I'm not a writer, not a very good writer anyway. I have read books plenty of times and said, well, I don't understand that or I don't like that, but the criticism is never my point, right?
That's right.
If it's something that I just don't like, I'm not going to read or watch it or consume it or listen to the record. You know, it's like, I'm not about wasting my time that way.
You could enjoy it and pick apart the little details without just bitching about the whole thing. To our point, if bitching is the point, then just go do something else. Find something else. The Expanse is awesome.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing.
Go do The Expanse.
Go rip that one apart. Have fun.
I have a whole lot to rip apart about that one.
That's true. It's pretty great.
It's so good.
It's pretty great. And maybe we'll do a show about that.
Cool. No, that's all I got for this one, man.
Yeah.
I'm just stoked as hell about episode 3.
Same.
I'm stoked about everything right now. Life is good because we're getting a lot of Star Trek.
Couldn't be happier.
Cool.
And it's not Voyager. See ya.
Bye.